She is the co-founder of a think tank, the Center for Human Emergence in the Middle East. Her approach to leadership and organizational development incorporates depth psychology, world philosophies, business management, political science, spiral dynamics, and consciousness practices. Elza is recognized as one of today's brightest minds in the field of Middle East development. Her firm, Integral Insight Consulting, advises business leaders in the West and in the Middle East on strategies for a post-oil Arab world. Elza speaks with rare authority about what it takes to evolve structures within a society and support women. She has earned the respect and affection of women in Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Kuwait, and Dubai. She's among the few women whose life's journey has taken her from a tribal cultural background to a truly integrated global perspective. Today, Elza will share with us an inside view of the rapid changes in the Middle East. We are so fortunate to have Elza Maalouf back with us, and please give her a very warm Inside Edge welcome.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. It's a true honor that you chose me for your 25th anniversary. I'm really honored, and thank you so much for that. Can you hear me well? Okay. Louder? Louder? I'm 45, but I have a young girl's voice, so forgive me. I'm trying to be like Jean Houston. My friend Jean always teaches me how to come, have my voice deeper, so we'll figure it out. I work with Feed Forward. I listened to some of you talking on the topic of the Middle East, so I would like maybe really a quick run of what would you like to hear from me about the Middle East? Just shout it out.
The role women are playing in our...
The role of women.
What's next?
What's next?
Election. How did this happen? What made it?
The Big Bang? Okay.
The relationship with Israel and Palestine.
Yes. Lebanon and Syria.
How can we best help as the U.S. involvement with this?
Okay.
The relationship of Israel and the Christian right.
That's a long story.
How can we avoid helping too much?
We have our own problems here. Yes, absolutely. Anything from the back? Okay. So what I'm going to be presenting is a template that could be applied in inner city Chicago, that could be applied in the problems that we're facing between Democrats and Republicans right now, because, they don't skip a beat. You can be a Democrat or Republican now, but you're saying the same thing. Just different content for show off, I think. So this is I will talk about the Middle East. I will talk about the uprising, what's happening in the major countries in the Middle East. But I will show a template that we worked on, Dr. Beck and I, in Israel and Palestine, and that could be applied everywhere else in the world. Actually, I'm now working in Mexico with a colleague on the drug cartel issue. So it's it's something that. The template, even though the content is going to be about the Middle East, this can be applied in different parts of the world. I was inspired by Diana's story about the Inside Edge. You told me that you went with Rama Vernon and Barbara Max Hubbard to the Soviet Union, and that's why you and your husband came and started the Inside Edge. So now the major problem is in the Middle East, and how many of you will be inspired to start something new that can support activists, can support people who are working in the Middle East And in other parts of the world, in Ivory Coast, in Zimbabwe, you know, tons of problems, but Zimbabwe doesn't have oil, so we're not paying attention to it, of course. So this is a great inspiration. Thank you, Diana. When you see these pictures, this is Tahrir Square in Egypt. This is the young man who sparked the uprising in the world, in the Middle East. Muhammad Bouazizi is the young man who set himself on fire and sparked this whole uprising that is happening now in the Middle East. And of course, we have the two dictators kissing Assad and Gaddafi. So I called it the Arab Spring Decoded. I don't know if it's an Arab Spring, to tell you the truth. I think it's an Arab winter at this point. This is not Europe. This is not the uprising in Europe and the revolutions in Europe in the 1800s or lately in the dismantling of the Soviet Union, because Europe had classical music, Europe had scientists, Europe had much more they were of a nation theme, nation building theme than it is now in the Middle East. Making sense of the rapid change in the Middle East. Now that my presentation works, I'm very happy. So Dr. Beck says, revolutions do not cause change. They confirm the change which has already happened. Typically, this happens more to societies that are already changing, as the raised expectations put pressure on existing leaders and structures, like the geologic tectonic shifts that will rise to the surface during earthquakes. So Muhammad Bouazizi in Tunisia, when he set himself on fire, it was a symptom of what's been brewing beneath the surface. All these value systems colliding in cultures. Tunisia has had a tyrant, had a dictator for 23 years. I mean, 23 years, the same person. We talk here that we don't have a democracy. We do, but we don't have an advanced democracy in the United States. Those people have never seen democracies. So, making sense of the Middle East quagmire. There are 4 major nation spheres in the Middle East, in the Arab world, because Iran is Iran, Turkey, and Israel are, but in the Arab world, there are what we call nation spheres and client nations. The major power nations are Saudi Arabia, Syria, and it used to be Iraq and Syria, Egypt, and Morocco. So when the uprising started in Tunisia, I was like, yeah, that's fine. When it started in Egypt, I started paying attention more, because Egypt, with Nasser at the helm and the changes that happened in Egypt, and Mubarak being a dictator, and Egypt has the 1 million military person. So it's a military power, and it's supported by the United States, of course, and it's a nation sphere in the Arab world. But when the spark started in Syria, in Daraa, that's when I really paid attention, and that's when I knew something big is happening in the Middle East right now. And I'll talk more about the details of each country. Morocco also, the young King Mohammed VI is a reformer. So he caught up immediately on the uprising in Morocco, and he's reforming the government according to what the people need. So that's a very good sign for me. He's young, he's European, he's well-informed, and he really wants reform for his people. So we're going to talk about Egypt's transition between the generals and the Muslim Brotherhood, Syria's Assad regime, and the Shia Crescent. How many of you are familiar with these terms? Shia Crescent, you know what's happening in Egypt? Okay. Libya, Gaddafi's brand of peace. Of course, domination. The 4-sided risk, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Yemen. Tunisia, transitional government. Egypt. So this is the uprising in Egypt. We have the young generation that went out to the streets. Egypt is more important as an Arab nation sphere than Tunisia. Tunisia is very important to its people and to all of us, of course, but we're talking about the power places and influence places in the Arab world. So this is Wael Ghunaim, the young Google executive who went to prison, and when he came out, he was hailed. He had almost 70% of the support of the Egyptian people in Tahrir Square. And you know, with that euphoria that happened, and we all watched it on TV, it was elating. We were all happy to see that. But what I predicted, unfortunately, is happening. This euphoria, these young people, the young generation, are politically, I don't want to say naive, but they're not politically informed. Yes, they claim, everybody claimed that Facebook did it, and Twitter and YouTube, yes, but we had revolutions before Twitter and Facebook and and all of that. It helped. It definitely helped. It made it faster. We were able to see what's happening in those countries and influence governments, our government, to do something about it. Yet, this is not the cause. This is not the spark. The social media is a helping agent, helping factor, but it's not what sparked these revolutions. The French revolutions, they didn't even have phones, So, so what I predicted is that these young people who are vibrant, courageous, they went to the streets, they opposed the military, etc. I knew that the military is much stronger than the young people, and the Muslim Brotherhood is much stronger from the young people. Let me explain. 4 or 5 years ago, Mubarak appointed his son as his successor. This is a president who has an heir to the kingdom, I don't know. The generals in the party of Mubarak were very upset. So they defected from the party, but they kept everything hush-hush. And they were preparing for a coup in Egypt, but they waited. They've been studying the vital signs that are happening. They're very smart. They've been studying, and they knew that a revolution is going to happen. And eventually they'll be able, instead of them doing the coup the way Nasser did the coup or Sadat came after him, they waited. So now these young people who are, let's say, pure politically, they're not well informed about how to build institutions, how to build a true democracy. They are replaced by the generals that were in the Mubarak party, and now they're putting people in jail. All the revolutionaries are being beaten and hidden. We don't know what's happening to them. So that's one thing. Now the generals were always behind the scenes, almost ruling, but now they're governing as well. So ruling and governing, but I don't think they want to stay in government much because they always have, it's like Pakistan, they will always have the power behind the scenes. Muslim Brotherhood. When I say Muslim Brotherhood, what's your reaction?
Scary. Death. Seals.
Well, yes. They're the ones who killed Sadat, actually with the generals. Theocracy.
Sophisticated organization.
Sophisticated organization, exactly. So the Muslim Brotherhood is not one color or one layer. It has evolved so much in the last 20 years. Now you see Muslim Brotherhood factions. There are almost 5 factions of Muslim Brotherhood. There's the hardliners, the extremists. that are scary, they're going to blow themselves up, etc. Not in Egypt, because in Egypt they all dress in suits and ties, so they look great. But beneath the surface, what's their value system? There's a faction that is the extremists, the hardliners. There are a couple of factions also that have the one true way, my way or the highway, you know, you have to follow what I say. But also there's an emergence of a couple of factions of young Muslim Brotherhood that have enterprising thinking. So they want to participate in democracy, in multi-party democracy, and move Egypt further. It's almost like the far right here in our country. You know, they believe in Islam, but also they're enterprising. They believe in free market, in capitalism, and they want to advance Egypt forward. So when we say Muslim Brotherhood, first you have this reaction, but when you see the different layers or different colors of Muslim Brotherhood, maybe there's hope somewhere. Maybe we can cash in on those people who are open. Their charter is not antagonistic to the West. And maybe we can work there because they're Egyptians. So you can't get rid of them. You have to work with the ones who are more of a moderate conciliators rather than the flamethrowers and zealots. Make sense? But it's not going to happen anytime soon, of course. It's going to be a process. Now, if you see here, Muslims and Christians got together in Tahrir Square, and if you remember, if you've seen on Friday prayer, the Muslims were praying and Christians were surrounding them, protecting them from any attack or anything. Unfortunately, the Copts, the Christians in Egypt, and the Muslims have a history of fighting and animosity that is resurfacing right now. So what Claire Graves says, when a culture goes through revolution, disintegration happens. Disintegration could look like a sectarian war. It could look like the military taking over. So disintegration doesn't mean that the country is going to be separated into pieces. It's a disintegration of society, of the social fabric of the country and the political fabric of the country. But disintegration, and if you remember anything from Dr. Beck's work, Spiral Dynamics, anytime a culture needs to go up a stage, it's like when you want to jump. Can you stay stiff and jump? You have to bend your knees and jump. Cultures are exactly like that. They have to bend, they go through dissonance, disintegration. This is what Europe went through. Millions of people died, but we were not watching that on TV. That's the only difference. Here in our civil war, how many people died? So that disintegration, that dissonance, that bending has to happen in order for a culture to jump up to the next stage. When is the next stage? That's the question. The good news here is that, and I talk about that in one of my articles on Huffington Post, the industrial age is barely now emerging in the Middle East. But it's emerging simultaneously with the knowledge and technology age, with the information and knowledge age. So it's going to be faster because information and knowledge age emerged in the West. So this is going to be faster, and maybe disintegration is going to look uglier as well, especially that we're watching it on TV and in social media. But that's what's happening right now. The role of women in Egypt, at the beginning, women were the center, were working together with men on the uprising, but unfortunately, the way it happens in the developing world, women are marginalized again. So rather than being equal partners in the forming of the government, to revise the constitution, there were 8 lawyers, none of them were a woman. And there are constitutional lawyers women constitutional lawyers in Egypt that are amazing, but none of them were women. One thing that was really telling in Egypt, a few weeks ago, Qardawi, this cleric, he's on Al Jazeera, and he was ousted from the country. And he speaks on Al Jazeera. He's a bit on the hardline side. He was allowed back in the country because Mubarak is gone. And he came to the Friday meeting in Tahrir Square. He went up on the stage, on the dais, and spoke, and to cheers from the people. Everybody was cheering him. And when he finished, the young Google executive, Wael Ghanem, came up on the stage, and everybody booed him. This is not a good sign. But, because they are regressing right now. Disintegration is happening in the culture. So this is expected, but it's not a good sign. So our plan is, Dr. Beck and I, hopefully when the State Department hires us, is to help these kids. And this was my advice to our foreign policy for the Middle East foreign policy, is to help those young people who have enterprising thinking, who are not antagonistic to progress. Let me not say the West. They're not antagonistic to progress, to freedom for women, to partnership with women, to help them understand the tall order to building institutions for democracy. And I'll talk about that. How am I doing on time?
15 to 20 minutes.
Oh, wow, okay. Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah is a reformer. I don't know if you know that, but he started the first university, mixed gender university for men and women. This is unheard of. He has to do it by stealth. He's opposing the Wahhabi brand of Islam and doing a marvelous job. He poured $40 billion in the infrastructure lately, because first he was afraid of an uprising in Saudi Arabia, which would be a disaster, but also he wants to support the creation of jobs for young people. They have trillions in reserve. Women in the Gulf region, by the way, have the highest percentage of PhDs and master's degrees. So they use this oil money properly. I don't know if in Saudi Arabia many of them can work, but there are many business women and many professionals, doctors and lawyers who are working now in Saudi Arabia. Sphere of influence, Yemen, Iran, and Syria. I'm going to skip this one to get to the template. Tunisia was almost the most European-like country in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. It has a large middle class, even though it was oppressed for 23 years and total corruption from, what's his name, Ben Ali. Now they have an interim government of unity. Again, Islamic Party and Nahda has great support. So you can see a pattern here emerging. What we call in spiral dynamics blue order. Order is emerging, but it's taking the shape of an Islam order. So what can we do to change that order into more nation type of order? Nationalism order rather than Islamic order. Needs to rebuild political system and infrastructure, of course, creation of jobs. Syria. Bashar al-Assad came after his father, and he was hailed as a reformer. He brought computers to schools. He's young. Him and his wife are young. They were loved by some Syrians at least. But unfortunately, he kept the emergency law that has been there for 48 years, Saeed. For 48 years, emergency laws, they can grab you, put you in prison, the Mazda jails, and no one will hear about you. Many Lebanese are still there, many Syrians are there, no one hears about them. Now, so far, with this uprising in Syria, 1,000 people we know of have died. I mean, they shoot their people. They come in tanks and shoot their people. I think, and I'll leave a space for question and answer, but our government is not pressuring Syria because, you know, it holds the Shia crescent. It's Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Lately, Saudi Arabia played a big role in pressuring Syria to move Hamas headquarters. Hamas is the Islamic faction in Palestine. To move Hamas headquarters to Qatar, which is a much better place. Qatar will give them money, so they will take them away from Iran's influence. The revolution is being repressed, emergency law still in place. This picture here, I was with the, you know where it all started? It started in Daraa, in Syria, Daraa, D-A-R-A-A. I was asked by the European Union, they have a project in Syria. I was asked to come and consult with them on a project in Daraa. And I met the governor. This is the governor here. He invited us to his house. We had a nice dinner. And I was surprised. He's high up in the Ba'ath Party. I was surprised. Why would they have such a high up presence in Daraa? Daraa is nothing. It's like an agriculture, arid area almost. So now we know that they had him there because they were afraid of a Sunni uprising and because of the poverty as well. One person, a father from Daraa was on the phone with Al Jazeera, and he says, we don't want pay raise in government jobs. We just want to eat. We want bread. We want to put food on the table. They don't have those basic necessities. So this is my advice, an action plan for the US and wealthy Arab states. To pursue a stratified approach to Arab democracy. What's a stratified approach to Arab democracy? To get to a democracy, there's a tall order. I talk about steps. First, we have to, let's take Egypt, for example. We have to study the profile, the mimetic, the value system profiles of Egyptians, the history of Egyptians, who are they now, what's the dynamics, how many different value systems and mindsets, and what's the sophistication in mindsets in the Egyptian culture. Because anytime Google goes to Israel, it goes straight to Egypt, so there's something there. Cisco goes to Israel and goes to Egypt. There's a trend. So who are the Egyptians? What kind of capacities in their brain they have? We have to study those profiles. Second, we have to study the synergy zones of synergy. What does Egypt have? Agriculture, tourism, capacity to work with technology. How can we create jobs in Egypt? What kind of jobs we have to create? You have to study all of this before you get to what kind of democracy, what form of democracy fits those profiles of these people who have these capacities, these types of resources within this country, and then we can talk about studying the form of governance or form of what we call democracy that fit the profiles of these people. I wrote an article. I don't know if you wrote it, if you read it. What is Arab-style democracy? How is it going to emerge? Is it a European democracy with what I've told you about the people, with the tribal and feudal cultures, with the Muslim Brotherhood, the different variations of Muslim Brotherhood? So, what type of democracy can fit those people who live in that area, in that country? And then we can talk about what type of institutions can emerge in this type of democracy. nurture infant democracies, basically focusing on indigenous intelligence. Anytime I go to the Middle East, I'm originally from Lebanon, but I don't claim that I understand Egyptians. I don't claim that I understand Palestinians or Israelis or Kuwaitis. I go and ask. I mean, I'm annoying. I ask the taxi driver, I ask the clerk, I ask the maid who clean my hotel room. I ask everyone, and you know more about the type of people who live in those countries from the housekeepers who come and clean your room, because they tell you, oh, these people are like this, those people are like that. I always ask questions to understand and I do ask community leaders, I do ask political leaders to understand, what am I designing for? I don't go, unfortunately, like our foreign policy and say, this is what you need. No, this is, you tell me, I believe in what I call indigenous intelligence. You would be surprised when you see these Palestinian women telling us what they want for their own country, how they want to see their state designed. And women in Palestine are a power to be reckoned with. And in Kuwait and in Dubai and in Saudi Arabia as well, and in Lebanon. Align with and empower regional nations of influence. This is what my advice to our Middle East foreign policy, to our State Department, is to align with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is now going to Russia and China, by the way, because we're pushing it away. So it's not just about the price of oil, it's about the influence that this King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia has on the Middle East, and he's a reformer. So why, yes, we can look at Saudi Arabia and women are not driving, and yes, of course, we have those problems, but we have someone whom we can align with and who can help the Arab countries, so we don't have to fit the bill. You know, they have to pay for it. They have trillions in reserve, so why don't we use their money to help their Arab countries? Pursue a systemic approach to economic development. Said, can you quickly say something about that?
Yeah.
Stand up, please.
I wouldn't take up too much time. Systemic approach to economic development. Basically, the only economy that exists in the Middle East today is, as you probably know, is oil. And the Middle East sort of never had a long-term development program. Everything is done, if it's oil-rich, it's done only to the extent to extract the oil out of the ground. Other non-oil-rich countries don't have much of a development plan at all. They do it ad hoc. It's left to the service industry. What we're talking about a systemic approach to economic development, you can no longer develop only the sectors that do with the oil sector anymore. A lot of think tanks think that if oil is to dry up today, the Middle East will go back to being intense within the next 70 years. And this is given that Wall Street invests their money wisely and they don't steal it like they did from everyone else in the last financial crisis. So systemic development would involve what we're getting rid of here. We're shipping out industry, manufacturing, and everywhere else. The Middle East needs it. The Middle East needs to have a middle class. That is so essential for development that follows the same patterns as the West does. So if you were to look at the Middle East now, in as far as human emergence perspective, the Middle East is where we were right before, right around the 1930s, right before the New Deal, right when, we created systemic institutions to create the grounds for creating a prosperous middle class. And to this day, the American middle class is the most powerful consumer group in the globe. So it will entail a lot of more of that. And if I have more time, I would elaborate more about it, but hopefully in an upcoming.
In upcoming. All right. Thank you, Sai. Thank you, Habib. I quoted Said in my last article at the Huffington Post, and he talks about how we have to tailor a Marshall Plan to the value systems in the Middle East. So that's very important. Maximize the use of technologies that anticipate change. The RAS system, RAS program. What's RAS, Said? Okay. It's a risk assessment and horizon scanning program that Singapore installed. I'm sure we have that in the Pentagon, and I'm sure we have that. I mean, we have the most advanced technology. But what RAS has more is Dr. Beck. He added the value system aspect to the RAS. So when you're scanning the horizon for future threats or opportunities, you're reading also the value systems of people. Is the Muslim Brotherhood gonna rise? What's gonna happen? So you're reading different value systems in Muslim Brotherhood, different value system in Hamas, in Israel, in Palestine, etc. So that piece is very valuable. Building a viable Palestinian state is very important. This actually was an answer to President Obama's speech last week, because it was missing culture, it was missing value systems, and the tall order to building democracies. He talked more about economic support for Egypt and Tunisia. That's not enough. It's a lot of steps to get to that. How many of you know the spiral? Okay, that's good. So this is a developmental system based on the work of Claire W. Graves and developed further by Dr. Don Beck. It talks about life conditions affecting capacities in the brain, adaptive intelligence in the brain. So a caveman or woman, they only needed to kill, come back to the cave. So those life conditions were simple enough. You just kill, and you come back to the cave, eat. But then they had children, and they needed more food in the winter time. And they started becoming clans, and clans needed to do more and to maybe build shacks or homes or something. They became tribes, and the tribes had a shaman. That's the purple system. Let me go here. That's the animistic, tribalistic system. The shaman said, now the moon is out, the god is not happy with us, or the sun is out, God is happy with us. So it's a very superstitious, tribalistic system, and I'm sure we still have that superstition. You know, you wear certain things if you're going somewhere, if you're going to make a deal or talk to someone. You know, we all have that. Then young men and men, it used to be, now women, young men wanted to rebel. They don't want to hear the shaman. They don't want to say someone tell us what to do, or if the sun comes up or the moon. They rebelled. So you had Attila the Hun. They wanted to invade other tribes and get all the spoils and get all the women and the gold, etc. And at one point, that system started disappearing when these men started thinking about death. I don't know if any of you read what Alexander the Great says. When he was dying, he said, "Bury me barehanded and barefooted and empty-handed, because I can't take any of this with me." So death. Now this was the rising of world religions. Because they were explaining what's after life. So we needed to know. It could be, this is a good myth. You know, these are great stories. And myth is not a lie. Myth is something that explains patterns within our psyche, within our collective psyche. So then blue is order. Blue looked like world religions, and also looks like nation building, which happened in Europe. And it didn't happen yet in the Middle East. This is the blue, the order, the nationalistic movement that is happening now in the Middle East. And then, of course, the American dream, the orange, multiplistic, rational, science, industrial revolution, the Enlightenment philosophers, and of course the 2.3 kids and the other car and the boat. And now it's disappearing in the US as well, which is a good thing, because now we can have more self-introspection, more sociocentric, humanistic. It's going to take a while for the US to go through that, but we are going in that direction. It's egalitarian. It's the healthcare system. How can we fix it? It's giving, equality to people. I was in Norway. It's an amazing country. It's 4.5 million people. I mean, we're here, what, 300 million? Yeah. So, but I mean, it's a beautiful system to see. And then the integral age appeared 30 or 40 years ago. It's the yellow system, and this is where we design for these profiles and value systems and what kind of institutions we need to have in each country. We cannot skip a stage. Cultures cannot skip a stage. They have to go through the pains and agonies of each stage. This is from Graves. I'll skip that. So we talk about flow of conscious democracy. I'm calling it now memocracy because it's memes, value systems, democracy. So it's versions of democracy based on evolutionary realities. Let me skip to the Palestinian-Israeli. Can I do it quickly? Do I have 10 more minutes? Who said yes?
We're already over a little than we usually would be. We could take 10 more minutes and then have Carrie sing. And if you had to leave, you could leave. Or I could ask Elza to wrap it up in 3 or 4 minutes.
No, give her 10 more.
10 more. Okay.
All right.
You got it.
Cool. This is the juicy stuff. So this is our partner Nafiz Rifai here. He says one could argue that the Arab Spring started at the Shepherd Hotel in Bethlehem on February 2nd, 2208. I repeated February. He's a Fatah leader in the West Bank, and I'll tell you why. This is a conference that the Center for Human Emergence Middle East, Dr. Becca and I sponsored in Bethlehem. So these people are groups of people who came and talked about what kind of nation, what kind of state they want Palestine to be. They wrote about the infrastructure, about healthcare, about the role of women, about the role, what kind of government they want, transparency in government, lack of corruption. We didn't say much. They wrote it. So it's again indigenous intelligence. New eyes, new lenses, new Palestine. So when we went to Palestine and Israel, this is what we saw. How many peace accords do you know of? How many negotiation processes? And lately, George Mitchell resigned. The envoy to Israel and Palestine resigned because, I mean, there are other stories. We can talk about them later, but also because of this. So what we discovered is that there is asymmetry. I mean, it's obvious to all of us, but no one is talking about it. There is asymmetry in the value systems between Israel and Palestine. Israel, for whatever reason, for many factors, is a first world country. I'm not talking about the history, why and why do we pay it. We're scientists, we assess it, it's a first world country. Palestine, for many reasons, is a developing country. So Palestine is based in feudal red, and they tell us that. We asked those people, these are Palestinians. They told us we are, as a culture, centered in red. And we have, these people, of course, they have more order, structure-oriented type of thinking and enterprising thinking, but they told us, in general, this is our culture. And we found different variations of value systems in Hamas. We found these guys in Hamas who wouldn't shake my hand and came, when they came in, I felt my grandfather is coming. You know, it's like, and in hierarchy, I mean, I've never seen a pure blue order system. It's unbelievable. And the head of, the biggest guy sat in the middle, and they sat around him, and one person came and gave us the titles and the profession and whatever of the people and their hierarchy in Hamas. But I got back at them, because when they wanted to ask questions, I said one question. And when someone asked two questions, I said, oh, don't answer. So I know how to deal with these people. But we also found enterprising thinking in Hamas. The only reason this is the former minister of planning, a technocrat with a PhD in GIS planning from Penn State University. A brilliant guy. The only reason he was elected by Hamas because of the corruption of Fatah. And this is what Fatah, the pro-Western party movement, tell us. So they tell us that they are corrupt. This minister of planning, unfortunately, was ousted because Fatah is again in charge. They don't keep the technocrats. This is unfortunate. So there are many colors in Hamas. And these are, we asked our Israeli partners, many of them are, I mean, we have many other groups. We met with different Kadima party leaders in the Knesset. We met with Likud party leaders in the Knesset, and we explained our system. It makes sense to them. They told us that they are a first world country, but they will descend to more security-related, security-centered culture when there's a suicide bomber. They have the walls up right now, which is a good thing, because they don't want to stay in that closed system, because you know that Israel is the second country startups on the NASDAQ after the United States, after Silicon Valley. Innovation, beautiful innovation. I met with many entrepreneurs in Israel. Unbelievable ideas and innovation. So what we looked at, everybody looks at the maps as a flat map. Of course, what Dr. Beck and I did, we flip it to see a side view of the mimetic contours of a culture, of the value system of a culture. It's the why. Why, when the leaders of Palestinians negotiate with Israelis and they go back and they can't apply what they negotiated? Why? And that's what, these are the white papers that we sent to the White House, to the State Department, saying this is the why. And we saw why. There's an asymmetry. So when we saw this asymmetry, we decided to focus. Where do you think we should focus? On Palestine. And we created an initiative called Build Palestine Initiative. It's about building capacities, building cement factories, you know, having the Palestinians designing for capacities within their own culture, so they can come to the negotiation table and be at a similar level from the Israelis. And this is Qassam, the son of the Mandela of Palestine. Marwan Barghouti is called the Mandela of Palestine. He created a university in jail. He's still in jail, like Robben Island University, like Mandela. Qassam was in jail. He was demonstrating, but I think he was high risk for Israel, I don't know. He was in jail, just came out of jail and knew about our program. He came straight and said, can I attend? Brilliant kid. He's red yellow, by the way. Integral thinker with red courage. Fatah, not antagonistic to the West. We asked them to draw the map, similar to this, of Israel. He told us that Israel puts the settlers, red, flamethrowers, feudal power gods, around the West Bank, on the hills of the West Bank. Makes sense. Then the IDF soldiers, blue, around the settlers. And then they push the enterprising orange to a place where it's safe, where they can thrive and grow. And then, of course, there's a green, egalitarian, peace-loving, supporting faction in Israel that is always supporting Palestinians. So when Qassam drew this, he said, oh my. So Israel is not just one enemy. There is the enterprising Israel that I can work with. There's the egalitarian Israel that I can work with. So we took it out of the Israeli-Palestinian. Now we're talking in colors. So they call our guys in Palestine the spiral people. And we had to create a superordinate goal to show them a future pull. Because if you stay in the history, who is what is Judea, what is Palestine, biblical, not biblical, we're not going to move forward. So we created a superordinate goal. We said, how about we look at the future generation? Many in Hamas and Fatah came to us, they said, we still have the key to our to my grandfather's house in Israel, and I want to go back. And we said, how about you take that key and you open a new school for the new generation? So this will, because it's a code of honor to return your grandfather's house. How about creating the same code of honor with different content? An honor to raise your kids and show them and you would be surprised how much they get this. It's unfortunate that our politicians don't get it. It's easy. Once you build a trust relationship and mutual respect relationship with them, I'm a sister, I'm an Arab sister, so they trust that, and they call Dr. Beck the freedom fighter. And we tell it like it is. When they decide, on our first trip, they asked us to go to the wall. Palestinians asked us to go to the wall to film us there and to show Americans the oppression. I refused. They were surprised, like everybody comes here and say, oh, poor victim, Palestinians. I said, I don't see victims. I see educated, brilliant people. Real estate in Ramallah, the capital now of Palestine, is one of the highest in the region. So I don't see victims here. I see a thriving society that needs to create a developmental roadmap for Palestine first in order for a roadmap for peace to happen. So this is our website, if you want to take a look, buildpalestine.org. This is the wall on the other side of, on the Palestinian side. They had Gandhi, so they have these aspirations. Yes, they have these aspirations. And when on the first trip to Israel and Palestine, Don told me when he was in South Africa, he worked in South Africa on the transition from apartheid. By the way, we met the cleric last week in Norway, and he had the most beautiful things to say about Dr. Beck. And they reconnected, and the clerk wants him to write some speeches for him because South Africa is going through a lot of problems. So Don told me, whites and blacks don't hate each other. I said, come on, Don. He said, and that's what I saw in Israel and Palestine. There are a very small faction of people who hate each other, but the rest, Palestinian kids want to benefit from technology in Israel. But they have to keep that look like we're Arabs, we're Palestinians, we hate Israel, but deep down, and that's what they tell me, we want to benefit from technology. We want to go to their schools, we want to go to their hospitals. I'm just going to go quickly to this. This is something that I created, peace on the spiral. Because peace in general here, when we think about